Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting into Ghost Rider, which is taking place after some of what we've seen with Absolute Carnage, to where at this point, Johnny Blaze, who is still the king of hell, he's finally found his way out, but very early on, it seems like this is going to be a bad thing rather than a good thing. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so at this point we've talked about the situation with Johnny Blaze and him taking Mephisto's seat after Doctor Strange damnation, and this is a situation we talked about a bit coming from Thanos' wins through the War of Realms and more recently in our talks about Absolute Carnage. But through all of this, with him still being fairly new to being the king, for the most part he's just been trying to figure out how exactly to go about this, with adding a couple new things, with the ways that he wants to run it differently. But along with this, some of the problems he's been running into, like a number of demons and souls trying to escape, but it actually works out into his benefit. Because if you guys remember back when we talked about the Absolute Carnage tie-in, when Carnage came for Alexandra to collect her codex, which Carnage successfully did, which is how Alexandra got sent here to hell with Johnny Blaze. But when this happened during Absolute Carnage, we also found out that the reason that Johnny Blaze didn't come to help her himself, it was because at this point he still didn't know how to make his way out, which is why he sent for Danny Ketch, of course, to help her out. And I got a link below that'll clear up how this went down. But fast forward to now with Johnny Blaze having the issue of people trying to break out, the way that this works out to be a benefit for him, it actually shows him a doorway which was left open that a bunch of demons and souls were trying to get out of, which prior to this point there were suggestions that it was left by Stephen Strange, but at this point in time Johnny Blaze could care less because he's more focused on bringing back those who escaped and returning them back to hell so they just don't tear up the land of the living. And so now when Johnny arrives, we find him in the back room of this bar called the Fadeaway, which we had also seen in the Absolute Carnage tie-in. But at this point in time, Johnny is actually physically here, because prior to this point, when he reached out for Danny's help, he had only appeared to Danny in like an astral projection, which at the time showed us Johnny Blaze just doing what he could, first and foremost to help Alexandra, but also using what magic or what tricks he could in order to substitute for him actually getting out of hell and get anything done. But now that he's back, he's noticed some things with himself are different, and most notably his sense for the scent of sin. It's been amplified tremendously to where Johnny expresses is almost to the point where it's overwhelming. And in the meantime, he more so figures he'll just use it as his tracking device to hunt down everyone who has escaped, to where at this point he figures it's about a little over a dozen altogether, and that's souls and demons collectively. But of course, with this whole thing going on, you have Danny, who's soon after activated, and although he tries to fight it, but eventually the rider always pushes through, and this puts him on the hunt as well. And just as a reminder, if you guys recall, last time we talked about Danny in the Absolute Carnage tie-in, he had really been trying to hang the whole thing up. He had bought this bar called the Fadeaway, which kind of shows us where the whole going sober thing was going. But at the time, this was like his plan to live some type of a normal life. But when Johnny reached out to Danny and asked for his help to help out Alexandra down in Nicaragua, with Johnny having hopes that Danny could stop Carnage, because at the time Johnny couldn't do anything because he was stuck in hell. But after this experience with Carnage, who killed Alexandra, who he just met, since then he's still been active with the spirit of vengeance. But even with doing so, like, that situation did not help his conflict. And so you take that with the addition of his mother passing a couple weeks prior, and then you add on the whole situation of him not being able to be with Stacy Dolan, who's like his childhood sweetheart, who for some time he's not been able to connect with, and mainly because being a Ghost Rider makes that pretty tough. And then you add on top of that she's married now, so for Danny, he's blamed the spirit of vengeance for much of that disconnect, with him believing that had he not been a Ghost Rider, a lot of things in his life would have panned out different. And so now in the process of hunting down one of these creatures which escaped from hell, he runs into Johnny Blaze, the king himself. And when he sees him, he more or less tells him like, hey, you don't look that stuck to me, because he immediately picks up that this is actually Johnny and not just his astral projection. And when he finds Johnny here, Johnny just more or less gives him the general rundown of what's going on, which is how he made his way here. And this opens the conversation of the two of them catching up and Johnny telling Danny that he needs his help to get this done. And not so much because Johnny can't, but more so for the reason of the number of creatures that escaped and getting them back before they can do too much damage. But also while this is going on, back in hell you have another issue which is boiling up, because back in hell where Johnny Blaze had left Decay like in charge, and Decay was like Johnny Blaze's lieutenant, who was one of the few who sided with Johnny when he became the king. But in the absence of Johnny, we got the return of Lilith, who is more or less the ex-wife of Satan, who was originally cast into hell with him during Heaven's rebellion. And at this point she's come back to contest Johnny for the throne, with her believing that it's rightfully hers and that he is more or less beneath her. And so now just to talk about Lilith left for a little bit. And just as a reminder, this is Marvel Comics. Like, don't go to church Sunday talking about DopeSpill said this was in the Bible. Chill out, bro. Like, I'll be in the congregation like, nah, chill out. No, I ain't say that. But with her history throughout Marvel Comics, it's a little crazy, because on the other hand, you have this other origin of her being born from air and a Riemann, who, if I'm not mistaken, manifested out of time itself. And at the point where Adam and Eve came around, Adam cheated on Eve with Lilith, and Adam and Lilith had a whole bunch of Lilins. Like, they were straight up called Lilins. I know, it's crazy. But as far as her full history, like predating humankind and everything, well, the craziest part about it is that Asgardian history doesn't even go back far enough to either confirm or deny how much of what she's saying is true, but at the same time, both stories sound true because they line up with real events, but at the same time, they seem to be a lie with them both contradicting each other. But I just go ahead and say, like, with all the time travel, like with everything with Silver Surfer Black, Avengers 1 million BC, and all kinds of people being time displaced, like, I wouldn't doubt that both stories are true in some way or fashion. But getting back to Danny and Johnny who's not aware of Lilith's return at this point, like when the two of them meet up at the fadeaway just to catch up, and to where even in their conversation, Johnny is asking Danny for his help, and Danny's just like, look man, last time I helped you, I saw a lady get her spine eaten, so if you need help, I know it's gotta be bad. And Danny knows it's probably not in his best interest to help him. But it's also at this time that we notice with Johnny, where he sees a guy walk in with a purple hat, who immediately catches Johnny's attention. In the middle of everything that Danny is saying, it's here that we get another hint of what exactly is going on with Johnny. And so now all the way in Hotel Inferno, where Mephisto's been in prison since Damnation, and much thanks to Wong's plan, and even all the way here, Mephisto, he notices a shift, and we see him tell Wong, who's paying him little to no mind, but he's trying to tell Wong that there's a huge shift taking place, and this shift is gonna bring a war, and Mephisto's excited about it. And he tells him, like, if you thought I was bad, wait till you see the competition, which I'm pretty sure he's referring to more than just Lilith and Johnny. And so at this point, jumping to Danny, who's visiting his mother's grave, to where this time she oddly appears, telling him to be careful of Johnny. And when she's telling him this, at the same time we go over to the dude in the purple hat who had came to the fadeaway bar, to where at this point in time he's left and gone home. And though we don't get an immediate explanation for Danny's mother appearing, she immediately just goes into warning Danny about Johnny, who at this point followed the dude home in the purple hat, and mainly because that guy's one of the people who escaped from hell. And not even so much like a creature or a demon, but he's a dude that died but got out through that doorway. And though I don't know what the dude did, but I kind of feel bad for the guy, because he's pleading with Johnny like, I did my time, I paid the price for what I did millions of times over, like, just let me live. But what Danny's mother is telling him while this is happening is that what he doesn't know is that hell has changed Johnny, and though we may not necessarily see it now, he's gone bad on the inside and he's becoming corrupt, and as a result, what he's come to do here on Earth will not end in a good way, even though it may seem like he's here for a good cause. And with this going on, that is up to Danny to stop Johnny, who has essentially gone mad with power. And so now, as far as the dude that Johnny had came to get, like his last words before he got fried, like the last words he got out, he had let Johnny know that others were coming for his throne. And Johnny, who didn't seem too bothered by it, he was just like, let them come, which is pretty confident for a guy who just figured out the doors to hell said push and not pull. Like, Johnny, you just figured out how to get out. And I would just assume, just from him being an experienced ghostwriter, that he has somewhat of an awareness of who else and what else is out there. But as of late, there's been a lot of new contenders that could possibly be looking to get for that throne. And they may not only be people who have been associated with hell, because in my opinion, I'm throwing everybody in that category, whether they're from Limbo, whether they're actually from hell, the 8th City, Niflheim, like, it doesn't matter, like the below place, like the one below all, he definitely ain't playing. And I mean, you also got the Dark Dimension, the Summonus, below place, Hades, Brimstone Dimension. Like, Johnny, you need to be making more friends than enemies right now. But really, that's just my opinion, because who's to say there's not one person looking to take hold of all of this? And Johnny need to watch out, because the bad guys, they getting real out here. But either way, that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below, because there's a lot of stuff I want to get into this month of October. And if you need to get caught up as far as like the history of the Spirit of Vengeance, which led to the history of the Ghost Rider, I got a link down below, because that was like the first whole half of my Ghost Rider 1 million BC video. So check that out if you need to get caught up on that as well. And also let me know what other things you guys want me to expound on as we go further with Ghost Rider, Absolute Carnage, Immortal Hulk, and all the other madness. But like I said, that'll do it for this one. Let me know your thoughts below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.